Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिवृतिका आचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की ग्रंथरा श्रीमद् भागवतम की हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की हरि नाम संकीर्तन की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Prabhupada and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevayam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevayam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevayam. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 76, Text 28. Labda Samgyo Muhurtena Kashnihi Saratim Abravit Aho Asadu Idam Suta Yad Ranan Me Apasarpanam Labda Samgyo Muhurtena Karshnai Saratim Abravit Aho Ashada Vidam Suta Yadranan Me Apasarpanam Labda Sangyo Muhurtena Srinam Saratim Abravit Aho Sasadu Vidam Suta Yadranan Me Asarpanam Labda Samyo Muhurtena Kashnai Saratim Abravit Aho Sasada Vidam Suta Yadranan Me Apasarpanam Yadranan Me Apasarpanam Yadranan Me Labda Samya Muhurtena Kashni Saratim Abravit Aho Asada Vidam Suta Yadranan Me Apasarpanam Mothers लब्ध संयो मुहूर्तेन कार्ष्णी सारथिम् अब्रवीत् यद्रनान्मे अपसर्पणम् लब्ध संयो मुहूर्तेन कार्ष्णी सारथिम् अब्रवीत् अहो असाधौ इदं सूत यद्रनान्मे अपसर्पणम्. Translation: Labda, attaining, Samgya, consciousness, Muhurtena, in a moment, Kashnihi, the son of Lord Krishna, Sarathim, to his chariot driver, Abravit, said, Aho, asadu, improper, idam, this, Suta, O driver, Yad, which, Ranat, from the battlefield, may, my, Apasarpanam, being taken away. Translation and purport by His Divine, the followers of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: Quickly regaining consciousness, Lord Krishna's son Pradyumna said to his charioteer, O driver, this is abominable for me to have been removed from the battlefield. Please repeat. Quickly regaining consciousness.
Quickly regaining consciousness.
O Lord Krishna's son Pradyumna said to his charioteer, O driver, this is abominable for me to have been removed from the battlefield. There's no purport, so I'll just read the... Except for me, no one born in the Yadu dynasty has ever been known to abandon the battlefield. My reputation has now been stained by a driver who thinks like a eunuch. What will I say to my fathers, Rama and Keshava, when I return to them after having simply fled the battle? What can I tell them that will befit my honor? Purport. Sri Pradyumna here uses the word Pitarao, fathers, loosely. Lord Balaram was of course his uncle. Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Prachatya Desitarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome Sri Valda Prabhu. How are you? So, the word fathers, anyway, we'll come to that later. So, this is happening, as we saw 5,000 years ago. And Bhagavatam is full of narrations that are from ages gone by. Scientists also accept long time spans. And they say the age of the universe runs into billions of years. But they accept human history only for the last 2,000 years. The rest of it, they say, it's mythology. Not recorded. They say only up to the Greeks. But in fact, even the Greek names are shrouded in mythology. I don't know whether you people know about the name of Euclid. Some of you might have known Euclid's Elements is supposed to be the most fundamental first paper on geometry, book on geometry. But now if you go on the internet, I think it's there even in Stanford Encyclopedia, they say there is no proof that there was someone called Euclid. They think that he summarized the knowledge that was existing at his time. That makes more sense because hardly a person could have just single-handedly brought up so many abstractions. You see? It's the geometry that you simply learn in school, angle, lines and all that, that is actually, involves enormous amount of abstraction. And for example, just let me give you an example. Everybody knows a point, isn't it? The teacher puts on the blackboard a point. It's not a point. A point, it's a big thing, a chalk piece mark. It consists of unlimited points. In fact, infinity of points. A point has no length, no width, no dimension. In Euclidean geometry abstraction, that's still there in mathematics. So, you can think of a big planet, you can think of a house, you can think of apple, you can think of a sand particle, but you cannot go like this and actually get at the idea of particle. Particle is an abstraction. Einstein called it a free creation of the human mind. So you learn this point particle. This has some connection to what Prabhupada said. I'll come to it in a moment. But the point is, it's an abstraction, it's not real. And the infinity of points make a line. The line has length but no width or height. And if you stack a lot of lines, you get a plane. Plane has got length and width but no height. And if you stack a lot of planes, you get space. So how is it from something that has no length or width or breadth, space has come which has linked to it. This is unknown in mathematics. So therefore there is no connection between mathematics and reality. And how did Euclid produce those ideas? It's a question that one person could not have produced a whole book of thousands of abstractions, and suddenly he just wrote a book. So it is possible that it might have come from existing thought. Greeks had a lot of interaction with Indians. So in what sense it came from India, it's an interesting question. Now, I remember when I was working in General Motors, it was in Flint. So first time I went to the temple, that was in the late 70s, then I would go every Sunday from the temple from Flint to Detroit, 1 hour away. Then I wanted to move in. I'll go Friday evening and come Monday morning. And then I moved into the temple and then I went to work, and then suddenly my hair went and my dress color changed, and I don't know what happened. And so I remember once I used to hear Prabhupada's tapes, both ways. And I remember I was reading a tape and I was driving to Flint, and I got into the General Motors parking lot. And this was way before I even knew about Bhaktivedanta Institute or science or anything. And I myself didn't know much science, nor did I need science to come to Krishna consciousness in a personal way. But then when I just came to a stop, and I was about to switch off my key, then Prabhupada said, he said, the scientists think that the point has no size, but point has size. They don't know it. And I still remember distinctly where I parked on the parking lot, what was the time, what was this. I remember sitting there because I have studied out a master's in engineering and I knew about mathematics. I'm sitting there thinking, wow, how did Prabhupada say this, that the point has got size? That was just stunning to me. Absolutely stunning. I remember sitting there, I couldn't process this. How does Prabhupada know this? And why is he saying it? Because it's completely different from everything that mathematicians know. See? Afterwards, when Vedabase came, one day I suddenly remembered Prabhupada said that, and I put this mathematics point and all that. And Prabhupada has said it many times, not once. In many, many classes, he always says, mathematicians don't know that the point has got size. I was just, amazing. I was thinking like that. And after about nearly 40 years of research and science, by Prabhupada's mercy, I'm now beginning to understand that Prabhupada is right and the mathematicians are wrong. And this has got connection to space and time. Our concepts of space and time. I don't know how I can, I will just say a little bit more, because I always think when I give these classes on science, people are not interested, but I think they are interested, devotees, right? They're interested or not? Huh? You like some devotees only, not all. Okay, so anyway, I'll just say this. So, this idea, there is a Greek guy called Zeno. We don't know whether he was a real guy or some Indian thinker. This is a complex thing, history. In any case, this guy had a question: is space continuous or discrete? Suppose I take a stick and I break it into two, and I break it into two, and I break it into two, and I keep on doing that. Each half I take in. Is this process infinite or not infinite? If this process is infinite, then you must arrive at something, a piece of stick that has no length. And then how did the stick come out of those things? And if the process is finite, you'll be left with a piece of stick that has length and you cannot divide it further. So which is right? And then he made many it was a wily fox, and he made many paradoxes like that. These are known as Zeno's paradoxes. And one other paradox he made is that if I put an arrow, if it goes from here to that distance, can it move? Because to go from here to there, it must go half of the distance, and to go that distance, it has to go half, and then to go that distance, it has to go to half. And if this process is infinite, then, it can't move. Huh? Yeah, exactly. It can't go anywhere. But whereas if it's finite, then there must be a distance, and that cannot be divided. That doesn't make sense either. So it's known as a problem of the moving arrow. And these problems are still not solved after 2,000 years. I mean, people think that they've solved it using calculus, limits and all that. It's not solved. I'm just going to speak about space a little bit, and then time also, and then I'll complete it. So the Zeno's paradox is there. And the Zeno's paradox, only in modern times and only through the work we are doing based on Bhagavatam in, the Institute of Semantic Information Sciences and Technology. It's the only place in the world that's coming. That's the idea of semantic information. We are actually showing that this has to do a problem with experience. See, in experience, if you have a finite thing, you can, you feel you should break it. But in abstraction, if I think corresponding to this finite thing, there is a finite thing in the world, and I can infinitely break it, and that's the problem. And now a separate idea came in science through relativity theory, Einstein's theory of relativity, that you cannot have meaning for any concept in science that's not empirically grounded. For example, if you ask what is the distance between here to some point, you have to say how you are going to measure it. If you don't know how to measure it, then the concept of distance has no time. Meaning. The same thing with time. If you don't know how to measure time, it has no meaning. It's called operationalism in relativity theory. So you cannot talk about the length of a table unless you know how to measure it. You see? A long time ago, when I was much younger, I've given some lectures called Science, Proof and God, in which I used to argue, that you cannot prove anything, because people think, can you prove that God exists? And I used to give simple examples. I used to ask people, watch is there. I show them, ask, what is this? They'll say, watch. And I'll say, prove it. And they'll say, you can see time. I don't know what is time. I don't know what is time. You keep on asking. Are you asking, what is this? It says, book, prove it. See, you can read something here. I can't read. There's only just black and white here. So you give him all kinds of trouble. Then, he says, well, if you're not going to be reasonable, I cannot prove anything to you. So if you can't prove even this is a watch, unless, I agree to use it the way you say, or You can't prove this is a book unless I'm literate. Now, how do you expect that I should prove to you that there is God unconditionally? Well, what about whether you're qualified or not? That's one argument. There's another argument. I don't give those popular science talks now because I'm after a much bigger goal. Another thing I used to say is, even at IIT I used to go and I give a scale and tell somebody, what is the length of this table? The student will come and he'll measure 1, 2, 3 feet, he'll say. Then, so I will say, but I don't have to agree with it, that the length is 3. That the length is 3, only that number you can assign only if I use the scale. What if I use this meter? Then the length of the table is 0.7. So, unless I agree what scale we are going to use, there is nothing you can say about the length of the table. This is called measurement. That becomes a problem later. Like this, we got arguments, but the point is that by the time quantum theory came, so ordinarily in Newton's mechanics they thought there is length and I measure it. Then Newton's physics and Einstein's physics, it became that there is length, but you cannot assign a number unless, so the number becomes very important. How are you assigning numbers? Unless we agree on a scale. But quantum mechanics says that even if you agree on a scale, you cannot give a number for the length unless you make a measurement. And nobody knows what is measurement for certain reasons in quantum mechanics. It's known as measurement problem. Measurement is not just taking a scale and measuring. Things have become much more complex. So that what happens in quantum mechanics, you can say it has got a length only when you observe it. It's not exactly right, but that's what people put it like that. That means your experience. So this has a length only when you experience. And that comes back to Zeno's idea of experience and reality. So this issue is very, very important. And we can actually present Bhagavatam scientifically much better if we understand what is the notion of space and time. Otherwise we may say something, but not only it may not convince them, it may not even be right. So space was then the time. We say that something happened in Satyuga. Varaha Avatar came and he killed Hiranyaksha. When did this happen? Our Lord Rama was there. When is there? 1.84 million years ago in the same Ayodhya. People say, well, we don't believe that. There cannot be an Ayodhya there. In Bombay, there is a lake, a pond called Ban Ganga, and that's from Lord Rama's time. That means the lake is 1.84 million years old, smack in the center of Bombay. India is full of such things. So I wrote an article called Space, Time and Objects in the BI newsletter. If anybody interested, they can take it from me. So, apparently Lord Rama was passing through Walkeshwar in Bombay and he was thirsty, and then Lakshmana put a bana and Ganga came and Lord took the water, so it's called Ban Ganga. So scientists are first of all going to say, we don't believe it was 1.84 million years ago, and we don't believe that somebody can put an arrow here and the Ganga from somewhere else can come here, and we don't believe that that pond can exist for 1.84 million years. How are we going to say? Now we might say, we don't care, we believe in this. That's a valid argument. But our believing in things is okay, but we should also try to improve our understanding. So Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness is a science. And, so it will be good for us to understand what is space and time. These are not ordinary concepts, So I'll just talk about time a little bit now. I spoke about space, but I didn't really say much. Time has got many manifestations. You feel time passing, is it? And you get old, but you cannot continually monitor it. It seems like if you look at yourself in the morning, 8 o'clock in the mirror, and then again at 9 o'clock, you got older, but you won't notice it. It takes some time 1-2 years, and then, the child grows. So this idea that if somebody is born, baby grows up, and then grows old and decays and goes, it has got something to do with the nature of time. And this is called psychological time. We feel the passage of time, but we have to know it's passing only through what happens around us. Seasons are changing, sun is going up and down, so we know that time is passing. But even when you are looking at the sun and it looks like it's stationary, nothing is moving, time is passing. And this time is described in the third canto of Bhagavatam, so it's very important. Prabhupada gives detailed explanation of how time is measured. And there is another kind of time which is measured time by watch. And this time is not really time. It's comparison of motions. When you say it has taken 5 minutes for me to go from here to there, all you're saying is that when I go from here to there, this hand has moved from here to here. So two motions are compared, and we have time, and watches cannot be made unless there is what is called periodic motion in the universe. We are lucky that there's a periodic motion. Sun is going around, or you can measure time by your pulse. If you know how many pulses can be the unit. So without some periodic clock, without some periodic process, you cannot make clocks. So atomic clocks are based on some periodic, process in the atom at the atomic level. And Bhagavatam says time can be measured by the time that sun takes to move across the diameter of an atom. Bhagavatam says that much. So, is the idea of Bhagavat atom same as modern science atom? You see? I was asking somebody, I think Dutkarma, so recently, that what is the idea of atom in the Bhagavatam? Because 300 years ago, Dalton said atom is the smallest indivisible unit. It has got some size. That means it goes back to Zeno's idea. If something is this big, why cannot in principle split it? But Dalton could assume that it's unsplittable because at that time atom could not be split. So then later the scientific process comes. If you could measure, meaning you could split an atom, then the atom is splittable, not otherwise. So therefore, any concept has meaning only in terms of how much you can observe it and measure it. So probably that's why they ask, how do you prove that God exists? Because can you make a measurement, whatever it is. So this atom originally was splittable, but now atom is splittable, and you had proton, neutron and all that. But now they have gone further down, subatomic particles, many of them. Then there's a standard model. So what is the atom? Is the atom that original unsplit one? So then the question comes, Bhagavatam says that the atom is indivisible. But scientists have divided the atom. You have got electronics and you have got atomic energy. I remember reading this when I was coming to the temple in Detroit. And as an electronics engineer, we used to count electrons across a semiconductor chip when we dope the chip, something called doping. So I'm thinking, how could Bhagavatam say that the atom is indivisible? And to add to the confusion, Prabhupada writes in the purport that the modern idea of the atom and the atom in Bhagavatam are more or less the same. I'm thinking, what? Scientists would never accept that the atom is not divisible. Not with all these things they have demonstrated. Then fortunately for me, that was also way back, 78 or something like that. I remember sitting in Detroit Temple lawn reading this and thinking, how is this possible? I'm an electronics engineer. And then somehow I felt what Prabhupada writes must be correct, but I don't know enough science to understand this. So let me just leave it like that, fortunately. Otherwise somebody could disbelieve and leave. Took me many, many, many years. And now I can give quotes from modern scientists who say that with quantum theory, atom is not divisible. So for example, Bohr wrote that with modern quantum theory, we have reached a new level of indivisibility of the atom. And there is another guy who said that this idea that particles come from the atom may be wrong. Just because barks come out of dogs doesn't mean dog is made of barks. So just because we break an atom and we get particles doesn't mean that the atom was originally made of particles. Einstein also made a point that if I smash a watch, the more I break, the more pieces I'll get. So this modern atomic physics is meaningless. But at the same time, that atomic physics has produced so many things, so many precise things. So how are we to understand these things? There is an important concept here called complementarity. I won't go into that. But what I would like to say, just to conclude, because these topics are very important, we have to understand what is time. When we say Yuga is, 432,000 years ago, Kali Yuga, Kali Yuga is 432,000 years, that year is not the year that is measured by calendar. It's not at all. In the same way, the yojana is not a distance that you measure by scale. How? At least with respect to time, I'll explain it a little bit. And these are also points that are fit for meditation on Krishna. Is also meditation in the universal form, and therefore it's the first step in God realization. So, when you come to time, what exactly is time? There are two kinds of time we have introduced at our institute, based on my work. One is the experienced time, and the other is the objective time. The objective time is measured by objective motion, but the experienced time is measured by experienced motion. So when in Bhagavatam it says that, you take such a gold pot of such and such dimensions with a hole such and such and you immerse it in water, the time it takes to fill is actually one, nimisha or one muhurta or whatever it is. That's actually a process involving experience. Very sophisticated idea. In quantum physics we call it as state preparation and observation. So the experienced time can also be assigned numbers. Experience can also be assigned numbers. If you say something is this big, and how big it is. Therefore, Prabhupada's argument that mathematical point has dimension comes from the following thought, I think, at least that's how I understand, which is that you cannot define a point unless you can actually bring it within your experience. And anything that is in experience has got finite extension. And you have to say that this is a point and you put it as finite extension. So it is possible that if you can measure experience, you can measure that point. Because you have to put it somewhere into experience, the point. You have to bring it to sense experience. That's why Bhagavatam says that although the atom is not visible, 6 atoms is visible. So they're also talking about... So they begin their description of space from 6 atoms, X atoms. And all this has got... So when you have experienced time, that's very different. And similarly, when you have experienced space, the yojana is not 8 miles of our kind measuring our 8 miles. It's different. There is a unit standard of distance has to be measured like you have standard of unit of time. And then Prabhupada calculates 1 by 132 of time is this much, our modern second. So he is calculating comparison between measured time in modern science and experienced time in Bhagavatam. We hereby submit the... I'm always thinking how much trouble he took to actually connect things which we may not even suspect. And Prabhupada says that here is the time measured by watch, and here is the time of Bhagavatam, which is by experience, but he conveniently omits it so that it doesn't confuse people or whatever it is. So Prabhupada has put enormous amount into his purports in the Bhagavatam. You see? By the way, they say here, I didn't want to start with that comment when I gave the class. They say the word Pitarau is used in a conventional sense because, Balaram was his uncle, but actually in Tamil, all the brothers of the father are called also fathers, and that's also true in Sanskrit. The brother who is, elder to the father is called Periyappa, big father, and the brother who is younger is called Chittappa, small father. So therefore, it's not conventional. So when he says Pitarau, it means father and all his brothers. So anyway, that's a minor point. So what I'm saying is that, but Prabhupada took enormous. So once Prabhupada said that it is not easy to translate, every word has to be perfect. And yet he just recorded and it was transcribed and printed in so perfect. It's a magnificent display of, Krishna consciousness, because it's thick and it's just translating and everything is perfect. So, this is a large topic, but I just want to hereby submit, as Prabhupada says, that when we read Puranic history, Purana means old and also means historical. So Puranic records involve the concept of space and time that are based on experience. And experience can exist independent of experiencer. And therefore it can be measured. Just like this length we think the table will have, whether we look at it or not, even experience is independent of you. So what we are experiencing is not the world in the first pass, but experience. The experience of the world is already constructed. And it is different according to your different senses. It goes like that. It's deep. And all that needs to be understood if you want to understand what Bhagavatam means when it says yugas, cycles. And these topics are not to be dismissed as not relevant, as who wants all this? Ultimately you have to chant. That is true, but we have to also read Bhagavatam, and Bhagavatam has all of these things, and by understanding these things we can easily understand I'm not the body, nor am I the experience. I'm not the body means I'm not the gross body, I'm not the subtle body, both. So that is the process of making progress, and when we make progress, then we can benefit ourselves, and when we preach to others also, we may not give always scientific lectures on the roadside, but we can actually say, when somebody says, who is going to believe that 1,84,000? And we can even give a very short explanation of reincarnation, if you understand space and time and experience. I can write articles and books on this, but I refrain from doing, because in so doing I have to reveal so many of the scientific ideas we have got, which karmis may misuse. So, things are like that. Any questions or comments? Stop today. Well, when matter, something interacts with the mode of ignorance, then you get the first triplet of elements, right? You get ether, and you get the sense of hearing, and then you get ear. So the ether is definitely space. Now, space cannot be seen. It's an element, exactly. And space cannot be perceived by anything other than the ear. So it is wrong to think that I'm seeing space, because space cannot be seen. But because space leads to other elements, fire can be seen, that's got form. So the space we see is more like fire element than original space. Anji?
Mixture.
Yes. So in the creation, first all the 5 elements are produced, and then it's mixed
and then out of those 5 elements you make. But still I think some element may be more predominant than the other. In the heavenly planets, ether element is more predominant. In ocean, water element, which is not the water, but water element. And on this element, on this planet, earth is... so space is a tanmatra. So it's an element, but it's different from ether. Therefore, when ether is perceived by the sense of hearing, you get space. And this object occupies space because not there is space and object occupies because it's made of space, ether. Like that it just goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. This world we see
Anji?
space, if you want to buy a house property, it's a 450 square feet, 100 square feet. If there is no space, we can't even imagine of putting the objects.
Well, who says there is no space?
There is space. That actually know that because the space is occupied.
No. That's wrong. Space occupied is wrong. Space is
I'm occupying about so many X, Y, Z, the dimension.
Slow down. That's a very important point. Slow down. Like the same example. Suppose you take the cell phone. There's an app and I can move it. But just because you move it doesn't mean there is that object, right? Like that, just because you can move things doesn't mean space exists like a thing. So when you say there must be space, otherwise how can there be object? That is called naive realism. I'm doing things and it works. It must be real. No, space is deeper. Space gives rise to object. Not that space. But it's also true that if you understand space properly, it contains room for the accommodation of objects. That's also true. But you must understand space. You know what I mean? I don't want to say too much about it now, but we can separately discuss. Because these are proprietary ideas. I just don't want to throw it in the public. Yeah.
There's a time using that atom you were telling that because how do we measure time as you were explaining that in Bhagavatam atom they are explaining?
Yeah, the time it takes for sun to move across one atom is called atomic time. That is... I can't tell you everything. We are doing research. It's proprietary ideas. If you publicly make it, then just like the Asuras were trying to steal the Amrut, they will take these ideas and they'll make a science which is atheistic. So we're trying to make a theistic science. So maybe separately we can discuss.
The atom looks bigger than the atom in modern science. They talk about particles you can see and then you break it up and you get the atom. So it looks bigger than the atom that science talks about, modern science.
Really? Why would you say that? That looks bigger? Because you calculated the sun...
They talk about particles you can see with the eye and then you can break those up into smaller particles. I think it's the sixth one is the one you can see with the eye.
Yes, X atom.
So then obviously 6 times smaller is still pretty big as far as modern science is concerned. The size looks quite different. Saying the size looks different from the modern.
Okay. So Maharaj is saying that Bhagavatam says 6 numbers of atoms is visible according to Bhagavatam, but 6 numbers of modern atom is not visible to the naked eye at least. But you see, that's again connected to the same point. When I see the table and now I measure, all you are doing is comparing 2 experiences. I am the experience of moving this like that, and the experience of the table length give rise to an experience that on the scale it's 3. So this is phenomenalism. Ernst Mach talked about it. So suppose if I assume that 6 atoms is visible, experienceable, I have to now ask, what is the reality corresponding to experience? There is matter, but it's corresponding to experience. But if you assume that when I see and I have the experience of, let's say the atom is about this big, say hex atom. Now if you assume that corresponding to this there is a hex atom in the world, then it runs into conflict with modern science. That hex atom would be much smaller to our eyesight. Whereas if you ask that experience corresponding to that, what is there in the world, that's quite different. That reality underlying experience is what we are trying to scientifically bring out. At that time, the atom can be properly known. Yes? Last question.
Scientists are claiming, like they can land on the moon. Dr. Prabhupada has told that no, it's not possible that they can reach the moon. Can you just make a comment?
See, I left that point about atom, right? Indivisible, saying I can't understand this. We should leave it like that if we don't understand. We can't go and claim, like Prabhupada said, oh, man has not gone to moon. We have not understood it. You follow? So, of course, at best you can say Prabhupada said it. Once I remember, they had the Bhakti Shastri class awards, and I was temple president in Bombay. They asked me to give the awards. I went there. While I was giving the awards, somebody came running and saying, oh, some TV people have come, they're asking questions. I said, what are they asking? They're asking why ISKCON is saying that nobody went to moon. So nobody knows how to answer. He should come and answer. So I said, okay. But that was a time when I also didn't know as much science as I know now, but even that is not too much. So I asked, he told me, are you, they said that you are a PhD in physics. And I said, yeah. He said, do you believe that, did your Prabhupada say that man did not go to moon, land on moon? Prabhupada said, yeah. And then he said, do you believe that? I said, yeah. Then he said, why do you believe it? You're a scientist. Give me a scientific explanation. I said, I believe it. I didn't say I understand it. I said, I believe it. That's the first thing. Then I said, if you see, if a man, says, I can give you 1,000 rupees free, and he gives you. Another time he says, I can give you something else free, and he gives you. The next time he says, I can give you a house free. There is no basis for me to disbelieve him. There is more basis for me to believe him. So Prabhupada said many things that are surprising, not just this. Right? So for example, Prabhupada said, I'm not the body. Which is also amazing because we think that we are the body. And now I have understood it. Right? So like this I have understood many things. So something that I don't understand, I believe he's right. So but I have understood that I'm not the body. Do you know that? He said, no. So let's discuss that. That I can explain to you. And when you believe this, then you'll have a basis for believing. That's one way of answering. But I have other scientific answers, but I'm not going to give it to you now in public. Then in IIT, I gave a lecture in IIT Bombay a long time ago. I gave a lecture called Neil Armstrong is not the first man to go to moon. So when I went to the class, there were 200-300 students. I said, how many of you believe that Neil Armstrong was the first man to go to moon? They all put their hands up. I said, at the end of the class, nobody is going to raise the hand. I guarantee you that. Then I this was way back in the 80s, so when people were more pious, students were much more pious, probably still are, but things are changing. So at IIT there were BTechs and MTechs and all that. And I explained about reincarnation and heavenly planets and how you go and you come back. And finally at the end I said, so all of you must have gone to heavenly planets and come back moon, because you're all born in India and you've got this thing. And finally when I asked how many of you think that before Armstrong men have gone to moon, everybody put their hand up. So and then I said, how many of you believe Neil was the first man to go to moon? Nobody put their hand up. And the third thing is, again as I said, that you can go into your ocean, but you don't live there. Correct? But in order to, if you want to live there and see the things, you have to put on this, scuba diving and this and that. And you have to have the right gear. So Prabhupada only said that if you want to go to moon, you must have the right kind of body to penetrate that atmosphere. So the moon atmosphere, for that to say that you have to know earth atmosphere, moon atmosphere, what is he talking about it? It's not the atmosphere of science. You follow? So you cannot concoct explanations and think that you will go and floor people saying, oh, that man has not gone to moon. You might end up looking foolish. I don't know, maybe you know more than me and you can give arguments. I can't say that, that you are, but I'm just saying that I would be very careful. Therefore, always Prabhupada said, speak according to your realization. Somebody asked him how to give Bhagavatam class, and Prabhupada said, speak your realization. Don't say too much. Are you following? So lots of things are there, but scientifically also I can explain, but those are very confidential. Okay, last question.
Why Prabhupada said, because there's life on the moon, that's now you explain that.
It's very good, thank you.
Unless a person has the faith in the scriptures, he will not become a devotee. So it's one of the main aspects.
And the faith comes from past experience.
Yes.
Not blindly. That's another point. There's nothing called blind faith. Have you seen a rocket? You have seen with your own eyes a rocket? Then why are you saying this? See with TV then. You have seen a rocket or not? No. Devotees always will give some roundabout answer. As yes or no. Finished. They have not seen it. But do you believe there is a rocket? Why? Now, somebody who is uneducated or a small baby, rickshaw may also believe. Amanga rocket Chandranukku poirukangala. They will say like that. He also believes. He has also not seen a rocket. You have also not seen a rocket. But you have much more experience, background experience. You have seen a cycle, you have seen a motorcycle, you have seen a car, you have seen a plane, you have studied aerodynamics, you know more things. So the gap to extrapolate is less. Like that, whatever past experiences we have of going into different planets and coming back is not forgotten. It's there. Therefore, in this life, you may believe in God, you may believe in higher planets, and somebody else may believe. But your belief is much higher quality because you have had experiences that are closer to that. So for you to extrapolate, to believe in Goloka and heavenly planets is less. Somebody can blindly argue, oh, you have also not seen, yes, also not seen. But what is your background knowledge? You have studied the scriptures, you have done tapasya, you have chanted, and in the past lives you have gone. You follow? You're following that? So there is that is good question.
Many experiences we've been having, not that suddenly.
Correct.
But each one may have a different experience in the same order.
Exactly. Sure. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय.